On that crisp October dawn in 2022, 10 hikers, 8 men and 2 women, set out from the Appalachian trailhead. Their laughter echoed through the dense forest as they adjusted their packs and snapped a souvenir photo against the majestic peaks. Dressed in bright gear, their spirits were as high as the towering ridges they were trying to conquer. They were an experienced crew, led by the confident stride of Marcus Reed, a 38-year-old survival expert and wilderness navigation virtuoso. Alongside him walked his sister, Emily, 32, and her best friend Sarah, 29, the only women in the group. Their beaming smiles were a stark contrast to the gloom of the forest. The others, James, 40, a former Marine, Tom, 35, an avid photographer, Daniel, 28, a quiet engineer, Liam, 33, a wilderness enthusiast, Ethan, 27, a student, and Chris, 30, a nurse, made up a tight-knit team. Their packs were filled with supplies for a planned 3-day trek. They were the picture of preparedness, sleeping bags tightly rolled, maps carefully marked, their camaraderie a shield from the unknown. Yet as the sun sank below the horizon on October 3, 1922, their absence from the designated rendezvous sent shivers through the small Appalachian town of Boone, North Carolina. They were gone, swallowed up by the mountains despite Marcus's decades of experience, leaving behind only the echo of their final selfie and the oppressive silence that had haunted the region for years. For the families waiting in the quiet town, the first hours stretched into an agonizing eternity. Marcus's wife, Claire, paced the porch of their modest home, her eyes glued to the winding road where her husband would arrive. Her 10-year-old son tugged at her sleeve with questions she couldn't answer. Emily's husband, Paul, sat by the phone, his hands shaking as he listened to her latest voicemail. An upbeat message about the stunning view, wondering if this would be the last time he'd hear her voice. Sarah's mother, Margaret, clutched a faded photograph of her daughter, tears streaming down the edges as she whispered prayers into the stillness of the night. The group had promised to be back by 6 p.m., a deadline written into their carefully laid plans. But when the clock struck 9 p.m., the unthinkable began to dawn. This was no mere delay. These were no rookies who had misjudged the route. Marcus taught survival courses, could read the forest like a map, and had prepared his team for every contingency. Extra food, purified water, distress beacons. The lack of a signal, a call, a trail was a wound that grew deeper with each passing hour. By midnight, Claire's steady hands dialed the emergency number, her voice breaking as she reported the disappearance of 10 souls in the Appalachian wilderness. The search began at dawn, the desperate pulse of a helicopter cutting through the foggy air, its rotors a desperate anthem above the dense canopy. Rangers from the Pisgah National Forest were mobilized, their faces grim as they fanned out across the rugged terrain, their boots crunching on leaves slick with dew. The Appalachian Mountains are a maze of steep ridges, hidden ravines, and dense underbrush, a place where sound dies in the foliage and visibility shrinks to a few feet. The team surveyed their planned route, a difficult but well-trodden path along the Blue Ridge Parkway, calling out names that came back unanswered. They found nothing. No broken branches, no discarded gear, no tracks softened by the damp earth. Marcus, with his encyclopedic knowledge, would have left signs, markings on trees, a makeshift shelter. But the forest offered only silence, a mocking emptiness that swallowed up hope. As days turned to weeks, the search expanded to include volunteers from neighboring counties, their brightly colored jackets a fleeting splash of color against the endless green. Drones buzzed overhead, thermal cameras scanned the slopes, but the mountains held their secrets tight. The 10 hikers seemed to vanish, as if they had never been there. By the end of the first month, the official search had been wound down, resources depleted by the lack of leads. The command post at the trailhead was dismantled, its maps curled in the humid air, and the camera crews put their cameras away, leaving a town shrouded in grief. But for the families, The silence was an agony they could not escape. Claire spent sleepless nights poring over Marcus's journals, searching for clues in his meticulous notes, while Paul drove the perimeter of the park, his eyes scanning every shadow. Margaret joined local message boards, her posts a plea for information that only prompted speculation, wild theories about bear attacks, alien abductions, or a mass decision to disappear. The public narrative shifted, the whispers turning into cruel rumors. Had Marcus, the survival guru, faked their disappearance to escape his life? The thought gnawed at Claire, a betrayal she refused to accept, knowing that the man who had built their home with his own hands would never abandon his son. Still, the lack of evidence fueled the story, turning the hikers into the ghosts of Appalachian legend, their fate a riddle the mountains refused to solve. 4 years passed, each anniversary a silent vigil marked by fading hope and unwavering pain. The file gathered dust in a ranger station drawer, a cold relic of an unsolved mystery. Claire raised her son alone. His questions about his father were met with tales of Marcus's courage, and Paul and Margaret clung to memories, their lives shadowed by absence. Then, on a grey August morning in 24, 2 canoeists drifted across a secluded lake deep in the Nantala National Forest, their paddles cutting through the calm water. The lake, a mirror framed by dark pines, was a place few dared to venture, its banks littered with fallen logs and tangled roots. Picking their way to the edge, one of them, a young man named Jake, spotted something unnatural among the debris. Shapes that didn't belong here, their colors muted but unmistakable. He squinted, his heart pounding as he realized they were sleeping bags, soaked and torn, their fabrics sagging with the weight of years. The discovery made him shiver, a chill that had nothing to do with the morning fog. This wasn't trash. It was a clue, a silent cry from the past, and it would reveal a history Appalachia had hidden for too long. Subscribe now, or the truth about what happened to these lost souls may be lost forever in a silence you could break. The kayakers carried their soggy sleeping bags to shore, their hands shaking as they laid them out on the rocky bank. The fabric, once vibrant shades of red, blue, and green, was faded and frayed. The zippers were rusted. The stuffing had matted into useless clumps. Jake, a 24-year-old biology student, and his partner, Mia, a 26-year-old park volunteer, knew enough to recognize the significance of their find. This was no discarded camping gear. It bore the marks of a group, the stitching patterns consistent with the high-end brands favored by serious hikers. They took pictures, their phones shaking as they documented the scene and alerted rangers at the nearest station. By midday, Ranger Elena Ortiz, a 15-year veteran with a seasoned eye, arrived, her truck kicking up dust as she scanned the edge of the lake. The sleeping bags had triggered a dormant memory, vague reports of a missing group from 2022, a case she'd inherited but never solved. She bagged the evidence, her mind racing as she drove back to base, the weight of 4 years pressing down on her. At the crime lab in Asheville, the sleeping bags were dissected with clinical precision. Dr. Helen Carter, a materials scientist known for her ability to solve mysteries, supervised the analysis. Her team took tissue samples, tested them for organic matter, and determined the degree of decomposition. The results were a puzzle. The bags had been submerged for months, not years. Their condition suggested recent exposure to water, not 4 years of soaking. Microscopic traces of dirt and pollen pointed to a specific drainage basin, a clue that led Ortiz back to the maps. The lake, fed by a network of creeks from the high ridges, had become the starting point for a renewed search. Its dark waters were now a beacon in the investigation. The helicopters returned, their rotors chopping the air, and ground teams followed the creeks upstream, their boots slipping over moss-covered rocks. The terrain was harsh, steep drop-offs, hidden caves, and dense undergrowth that absorbed the light. And yet, The sleeping bags came from somewhere, carried away by a force the mountains couldn't hide. The breakthrough came on the 5th day, when a ranger named Tyler, a wiry 30-something with a climber's instincts, spotted a faint trail of debris along a narrow creek bed. Torn fabric, a broken buckle, a water bottle cap, all pointed upstream to a shaded gully where the water roared after storms. The team rappelled down, their ropes taut over slick granite. And there, wedged under an overhang, they found more. A rucksack, its contents spilling out. Maps, a compass, a child's toy that didn't fit. The toy, a small plastic dinosaur, belonged to Ethan's nephew, a gift he'd been carrying for good luck. A detail Claire had mentioned in her endless requests. The ravine was a graveyard of sorts. The hikers' gear had been scattered by a flash flood that must have swept through it. A raging current that explained the sleeping bag's journey to the lake. Ortiz pieced it all together. The storm of 2023, one of the worst on record, had likely shifted the evidence, carrying it downstream after years of hiding. The realization shifted focus. Marcus and his crew hadn't disappeared by choice. They'd been swallowed up by nature's fury. Their survival skills were no match for a flash flood. Subscribe now, or let the memories of these lost hikers fade into a void you could illuminate. The ravine led to a larger cave system, its entrance choked with vines, a sight the initial search had missed in its haste. Inside, the air was cool and still, the floor strewn with bones, human remains scattered but recognizable by the decayed clothing clinging to them. Forensic teams entered, their flashlights casting long shadows as they catalogued the scene. 10 skeletons, their positions suggesting desperate huddling, their gear piled high as if for warmth. Marcus's remains bore a cracked skull, likely from a fall, while Emily and Sarah showed signs of prolonged exposure. Their more frail bodies were less suited to endurance. The cave told a story of survival turned tragedy. Trapped by the floodwaters, they sought shelter, their supplies dwindling, their hope fading with every breath. DNA confirmed their identities, a confirmation that broke Claire's stoic composure, her sobs echoing as she clutched a toy dinosaur. The public was stunned, the mystery solved, but the loss increased. The Appalachian Mountains revealed themselves as both refuge and executioner. Yet one question remained. How had they ended up so far off their route? The investigation turned to the cave's geology, mapping its tunnels with laser precision to trace the flood's path. Geologists found evidence of a collapse, a landslide caused by the storm of 23 that had sealed the hikers' fate, burying them deeper until the waters dug a new exit. Interviews with locals revealed a tale of storm, a night of thunder so fierce it shook windows in Boone, a downpour that reshaped the mountains. The pieces came together. Marcus, leading his group off the trail to avoid the worst of the weather, misjudged the terrain, trapping them in a gully. Sleeping bags torn loose by the floodwaters, floating toward the lake. A final message from the lost. Claire visited the site, her son at her side, laying flowers where the cave's mouth gaped, a rite of closure amid endless grief. The story spread, a cautionary tale of nature's indifference but also of human resilience. Their final days a testament to camaraderie. For the families, the truth brought peace and pain, a duality they will carry forever. The discovery of the cave and its grim contents sent shockwaves through the forensics team, their sterile lights illuminating a scene that spoke of desperation and defiance. Dr. Helen Carter returned to the lab, her attention focused on the remains, each bone a clue to the hikers' final hours. The skeletons had been meticulously catalogued. A crack in Marcus's skull indicated the sacrifice of the leader, perhaps shielding the others as he fell. Emily and Sarah's frail bodies bore signs of malnutrition, their last actions likely having involved tending to the group. The cave floor had yielded scraps of cloth, a melted flashlight, and a journal page. Its ink was smudged, but legible enough to reveal Marcus's final entry. "Trapped. The water is rising. Hold on." The words cut through Claire as she saw them. The father's determination, burned into fading ink, a testament to his fight for his team. Geological mapping confirmed the role of a landslide, a natural tomb sealed by the flood of 23. Its force had later dug a path to free the sleeping bags. Ortiz coordinated with meteorologists. Their data painted a picture of a storm that dumped 12 inches of rain in a single night. A downpour that turned creeks into torrents and gullies into death traps. The investigation expanded, tracing the last known movements of the hikers. Locals recalled seeing the group near a scenic overlook on October 2nd. Their laughter carried on the wind, but no one noticing their deviation. Satellite images from that day showed clear skies, a cruel irony that hid the storm brewing inland. The team assumed that Marcus, sensing the change, had led them off the trail to find shelter, a decision that briefly saved them but doomed them to the ravine. The divers searched the lake, recovering more gear, a tent pole, a boot, each piece a fragment of their lost lives. Claire and Paul sifted through the evidence, their hands shaking as they recognized Emily's scarf. Its greenish hue had faded, but it was familiar. The audience watched, transfixed as history unfolded. The beauty of the Appalachian Mountains was now a shroud over tragedy, but the shadow remained. The journal hinted at a struggle. Scratches on the cave walls, a broken knife, suggested that not everyone had succumbed to nature alone. Ortiz ordered a deeper forensics scan, her instincts pricking at the thought of foul play. The state of the sleeping bags, recently soaked, raised questions. Had they been moved, or had the flood timing been misjudged? The isolation of the cave fueled speculation, whispers of evidence being hidden, or survivor guilt. Claire refused to believe Marcus had led them astray, her faith in his skills unwavering, while Margaret clung to Sarah's memory, her tears a silent plea for answers. The truth teetered on the edge, a puzzle half solved, its pieces scattered across the heart of the mountain. Subscribe now, or let the mystery of these hikers' final moments slip into darkness. A silence you could pierce with your encouragement. The forensic examination of the cave deepened. Dr. Carter's team worked late into the night, their headlamps casting an eerie glow over the skeletal remains and scattered gear. Scratches on the walls, jagged and ragged, suggested desperate attempts to escape, and a broken knife, its blade snapped at the hilt, suggested a struggle beyond the flood. Carter examined the bones under high-powered microscopes, noting fractures in Liam's ribs and Ethan's arm, injuries inconsistent with a simple cave-in. They were signs of impact, perhaps from a fall or blow, raising the specter of human intervention. The journal page clutched in Marcus's bony hand contained blurry words that went beyond the original entry. "Someone is here. Not us." A chilling fragment that sent a chill through the lab. Ortiz, looking through the evidence, felt the case shift from natural tragedy to potential crime. Her hardened face tightened as she ordered DNA testing of every detail. The recently soaked sleeping bags fueled her suspicions. Had they been deliberately placed in the lake? Or did the timing of the flood hide a darker truth? The investigation turned to the hikers' last day, retracing their steps with new urgency. Locals pressed for details, recalling a dark figure near the lookout. A lone hooded man who vanished when approached. A gas station clerk in Boone remembered selling supplies to the group on October 1st and to a stranger matching that description. His purchase of rope and tarp was suspicious. Satellite data, reanalyzed, showed a brief off-trail heat signature hours before the storm, an anomaly that had been chalked up to wildlife but was now being reconsidered. Ortiz had a profile, a poacher, a drifter, or a lost soul with unclear motives. Someone who might have crossed paths with the hikers deep in the ravine. The seclusion of the cave, miles from any trail, supported the theory. They had been led there, or forced there. Their gear was evidence of a fight they could not win. Claire and Paul returned to the site, their footsteps heavy as they moved through the ravine. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. The toy dinosaur clutched by Claire felt like a lifeline to Ethan, her nephew's gift, now a relic of loss. Margaret joined them, her hands stroking Sarah's scarf, its green threads a fading echo of her daughter's spirit. The families demanded answers, their grief fueling a public outcry that pressured authorities to escalate. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation stepped in, its agents scouring the region for the hooded man, interviewing hermits and trappers who roamed the countryside. A breakthrough came when a trapper, Amos Reed, admitted to seeing smoke near a ravine on October the 3rd, 1922, a fire he had avoided for fear of trouble. His description of a man with a limp and a scar on his face matched the gas station clerk's recollection, a lead that sent investigators into the hills. The cave provided more clues: a rusty shovel, its handle wrapped in duct tape, and a bloodstain on a rock. His DNA, foreign to the tourists. The shovel, when tested, showed traces of ginseng, linking it to the illegal trade that thrives in Appalachia, a lucrative underground economy. Ortiz linked it to the Mayfair case in Tanaka's Disappearance, a parallel that chilled her. Was another poacher involved? A blood sample sent to the lab matched a known criminal, Randall Rusty Crowe, a 45-year-old drifter with a history of burglaries and assaults, last seen in the area in 2022. His limp, a souvenir of a bar fight, and scarred face matched eyewitness accounts, painting him as a suspect who might have surprised the hikers, taken their gear, and left them for dead. The storm, a convenient cover, buried his crime until the floodwaters revealed it. Claire's voice broke as she heard the news, her faith in Marcus's leadership confronted with the horror of betrayal. As Margaret's sobs filled the room, Sarah's fate was now entangled in violence. The audience was stunned, the Appalachian wilderness revealed as a stage for human darkness, its beauty a mask of betrayal. Subscribe now, or let the truth of these hikers' brutal ends be erased forever. A silence you could shatter with your support. The revelation of Randall Rusty Crowe as a suspect sparked a firestorm in the investigation. His name is a dark thread woven into the hikers' final hours. Dr. Carter's lab hummed with urgency as the bloodstain on the cave rock was cross-checked. The DNA profile was a near-perfect match to Crowe's notes from the 22 Tennessee attack. The rusty shovel, its handle wrapped in duct tape, the calling card of a backcountry poacher, yielded faint fingerprints, degraded but enough to confirm his presence. Ortiz pored over Crowe's file, a litany of petty crimes, poaching, theft, trespassing, culminating in a 6-month stint that ended in early 2020. Placing him in the Appalachian just before the hiker's disappearance. His limp, a legacy of a botched robbery, and a scarred face from a knife fight matched every witness description, a portrait of a man hardened by the wild and desperate for gain. Traces of ginseng on his shovel tied him to a lucrative underground trade, suggesting he had been digging in a ravine when the hikers had trespassed on his property. A confrontation that had turned deadly. The State Bureau of Investigation began a manhunt, its agents fanning out across the wilderness, knocking on doors at isolated cabins and interviewing secretive individuals who knew the secrets of the mountains. Crowe's last known address, a ramshackle trailer near the Tennessee-North Carolina border, was abandoned, its windows boarded up, its yard overgrown with weeds. Neighbors spoke of a man who kept to himself, disappearing after a wild night in October 2020. His departure was marked by a hasty sale of ginseng roots to a suspicious buyer in Asheville. Satellite images from the period showed a heat signature near the ravine consistent with a campfire, its glow extinguished by the ensuing rainstorm. The storm, a once-in-a-decade event, was Crowe's ally, washing away evidence and burying the crime until the sleeping bags floated to the surface of the lake. Ortiz theorized that he had ambushed the group, using a shovel as a weapon, then stripped them of their gear. Sleeping bags, backpacks, even a toy dinosaur, before escaping as the deluge rose. The cave, a natural trap, had become his vault, sealing the hiker's fate and his secret. Claire, Paul, and Margaret returned to the cave, their grief now mingling with rage as they confronted the evidence. The journal page with Marcus's cryptic note, "There's someone here, not us," felt like an unheeded warning. His leadership had been betrayed by a stranger's greed. Claire clutched a toy dinosaur, its plastic scratched but unbroken, a symbol of Ethan's innocence lost to Crow's violence. Margaret ran her hand over Sarah's scarf, its green threads now a shroud for her daughter's final struggle. While Paul's hands shook as he held Emily's melted flashlight, its beam extinguished by the darkness of the cave. The families clamored for justice, their voices joining the public outcry that flooded social media with cries of "justice for tourists," a hashtag that became popular as the story spread. Film crews descended on the area, their cameras capturing the rugged beauty of the ravine against the backdrop of a dark story unfolding. The Appalachian Mountains became a villainous stage. The forensic team dug deeper, finding a fragment of a torn jacket near the cave entrance, the fabric of which matched Crow's preferred brand. Bloodstains on the lining were grim confirmation. A broken knife blade that was analyzed showed microscopic metal marks from a shovel, suggesting a confrontation in which Crow overpowered Marcus. The group's leader had fallen defending his team. The skeletal positions, clustered, some with their hands raised, painted a picture of resistance. Their survival skills were no match for the poachers' ruthlessness. Dr. Carter estimated they would last 2 days, their water bottles empty, their food supplies looted, before they succumbed to exposure and injury. A storm-induced avalanche was the final blow, burying them as Crow escaped with his prize. The hunt intensified. Agents tracked Crow's movements through pawnshop records and ginseng sales, a trail that led to a secluded cabin in West Virginia. A dawn raid turned up a cache of stolen roots, a rusty truck, and a journal detailing his haul, including an entry from October 2020. A big haul, 10 fools left me to the elements. The evidence was overwhelming, but Crow had vanished, his trail gone cold, leaving investigators to piece together the details of his escape. Ortiz suspected he had fled to Canada, a common haven for poachers. His limp slowed him down, but it did not stop him from running. The families were faced with a hollow victory. Justice had been delayed, their loved one's killer still at large. Claire vowed to keep searching. Her son's questions about his father fueled her determination. While Margaret and Paul joined support groups, their pain became a bond with the families of other victims. Public attention grew. The story was a cautionary tale of wildness and malice, its resolution dependent on Crow's capture. Still, doubts remained. The recent sinking of sleeping bags suggested that Crow might have returned, perhaps to retrieve gear or cover his tracks, but had been stopped by the flood. Divers found a submerged tarp near the lake, the fabric bearing Crow's fingerprints, a sign that he had been there in 2023. A second cave entrance discovered by geologists showed signs of recent disturbance. Scratched earth, a broken branch, hinted at his presence before the storm washed away the evidence. Ortiz ordered an ambush. Her team patrolled the lakeshore, their night vision goggles scanning the area for movement. Appalachia, once a silent witness, was now a living threat. Crow's shadow loomed over the unsolved case. The family's hope wavered, their grief a heavy burden, while the mountains whispered secrets yet to be revealed. Lakeside stakeout stretched into the humid nights of August 2024. Ranger Ortiz and her team huddled in the shadows of the Nahala National Forest, their breath visible in the cool air, as they watched for any sign of Randall Rusty Crow. The tarp, his fingerprints like a smoking gun, had turned the investigation into a tense game of cat and mouse. Appalachia, now a battleground where nature and man's malice intertwined. Night vision goggles scanned the trees, their green glow catching the occasional deer or owl. But the limping figure did not appear. The divers' find confirmed Crow's return. The permeable state of the tarp suggested he'd been there just weeks before the sleeping bags arrived, perhaps to retrieve his cache or erase his tracks. Ortiz reviewed the log of the cabin raids: ginseng roots, a rusty shotgun, Crow's journal. His cryptic notes were a mockery. The flood hit him hard, but the lake gave them up. The words fueled her resolve, a personal vendetta born of years of unsolved cases. Her weathered face was determined. The forensic team continued to work. Dr. Carter's lab was a hive of activity as they analyzed the tarp and debris from the cave. The fabric yielded traces of Crow's DNA mixed with soil unique to the ravine, proving he'd held on to it after the storm. The second cave entrance, its scarred earth like a fresh wound, suggested he'd entered after the collapse, perhaps in 2023, to salvage gear or bury evidence deeper. A nearby lockpick, broken, its metal scrawled with Crow's initials, completed the link. He'd been meticulous, a poacher turned predator. The hiker's remains told a parallel story. Marcus's head trauma, the fatal blow from the shovel, Emily and Sarah's broken fingers, signs of a struggle, others with defensive wounds. The group was devastated. A page from the journal. "There's someone here, not us," now screamed Crow's ambush. His greed had turned the rescue mission into a massacre. Carter estimated the attack had occurred on October 2nd, 2020. The onset of a storm had obscured his escape, while a flood had risen, trapping the campers in their cave shelter. The hunt had expanded, agents coordinating with Canadian Border Patrol agents, their radios crackling with updates on Crow's possible route. A trucker in West Virginia remembered a scarred man giving him a ride north in late October 2020. His limp was noticeable, his duffel bag heavy with roots. Ontario pawnshop records showed the sale of camping gear, backpacks, a camera matching those of Tom, linked to a man matching Crow's description. The trail grew colder, but more persistent. Ortiz dispatched a portrait artist. The resulting image was posted at rural outposts. His scarred face haunted gas stations and diners. Locals whispered of a limping phantom, a poacher's legend. Some claimed to have seen him near the Quebec border. His presence was a phantom in the wild. The Bureau of Investigation offered a $50,000 reward. Public outrage, turning the thirst for justice for hikers into a movement. Donations poured in, and families shared stories of loved ones lost. Claire, Paul, and Margaret channeled their grief into action, joining Ortiz on patrol, their presence a silent plea. Claire's son, now 14, carried Marcus's compass, its needle as frozen as their hope, while Margaret clutched Sarah's scarf, its green threads a lifeline to her daughter's memory. Paul's voice broke as he remembered Emily's laughter, a sound lost to Crow's violence. The cave had become a place of pilgrimage. Flowers withered at its entrance, a shrine to 10 souls taken too soon. Public attention grew. True crime podcasts picked apart the case. Their narrators portrayed Crow as a mountain monster, his limp as the mark of Cain. But the family's pain was acute. Their nights were filled with nightmares of the ravine. The roar of the storm was a constant echo. The breakthrough came on September 15, 2024, when a trapper in Quebec reported a limping man selling ginseng near a remote lake, his scarred face matching the sketch. Agents converged, their boats cutting through the fog, but Crow had vanished again, leaving behind a bloody bandage and a rusty knife. Evidence that he had been wounded, perhaps from a recent skirmish. The blood on the bandage confirmed his DNA, a sign that he was still alive. His escape had been desperate. Ortiz tightened border controls. Drones scanned the dense forests, their hum a relentless pursuit. The second cave entrance was re-examined, revealing a hidden crevice with more gear. A worn map, a watch stopped at 3:17 a.m., suggested Crow had lingered, perhaps wounded before escaping. The map, marked with poaching sites, indicated a network drawing others into his trade, a conspiracy that deepened the mystery. The families faced a wrenching burden, their hopes flickering as Crow's shadow loomed. Claire vowed to see him in a cage, her son's future dependent on justice. While Margaret and Paul clung to the possibility of closure, Appalachia, once a sanctuary, now held a predator, its trails a maze of danger. The public's eyes were riveted. The story is a gripping saga of survival and betrayal, its ending unwritten. Subscribe now, or let the pursuit of this killer fade into the mountain silence, a void you could fill with your participation.